So today is John the Baptist's day of Advent with his strange sartorial choices and his dietary restrictions. But in the Gospel of Mark, he's only talking about preparing the way and calling out for repentance. There are no brood of vipers, sadly, in this text, and he's not giving social justice advice as he is in the Gospel of Luke. It's just about preparing the way. And a huge part of preparing the way is repentance, a super churchy word. And most of the time we think about the external actions we do being the things that we confess, and we'll do that in our service later. But there's also something about repentance that goes a little deeper than that. What was the motive behind doing the action I did? And if you really want to take some inner work, you take one step back and think, well, what lies behind the motive? And that creates a kind of self-knowledge. And I think for centuries, great spiritual masters have said, self-knowledge leads to knowledge of God. Knowledge of God leads to self-knowledge. And you could count our Advent conversation partner, Meister Eckhart, among those who would agree with what that spiritual truth teaches. A reminder that for Advent, we're hanging out with the great Meister Eckhart, who lived in the late 1200s into the 1300s. You don't have to know anything about him. We're just using his theology as a lens to think about these texts in a different way. So Eckhart would say that yes, self-knowledge and knowledge of God come together. And there's really a oneness in them, within you. One of the great motifs of his theology is the idea of the ground that's in all of us, the center core of who we really are. And in that place, he says, your knowledge of yourself is knowledge of God. And knowledge of God is knowledge of yourself. It's in that deepest part of who we are. And he talks a lot about the spiritual life being about a return to that ground. Most of us think that we're trying to get somewhere else, trying to find our way to some promised land, and there are great biblical motifs, but Eckhart would say, well, the promised land has always been with you. It lies in your deepest places. It lies in your deepest heart. And part of the return is about knowing yourself well enough to find your way back there. Self-knowledge is difficult, just as repentance is difficult. It requires time and space to ask difficult questions. Not just, gosh, why was I trying to control the outcome of that situation so much? But, wow, my motive was that I'm really afraid of what would happen. Well, why am I so afraid? Or, wow, I really put my armor on every time I go into a new relationship. Gosh, I wonder why I feel like people are out to betray me. Wow, I wonder what the story is that I'm telling myself about that. I don't know what it is for you, but there's something like that in all of our lives. We do something, we have a motive for it, but there's something deeper that comes from who we were, the way we want to belong, or the way we give or receive love, that sometimes creates the fissures and fractures and breakages within us. But most of us, we just walk through life kind of not paying attention at that deeper level because it's really hard. And Eckhart would say there are three things that keep us from really knowing who we are. The first one he would say is a scatteredness, a kind of inattention. So I think that happens externally. I go to the gym first, then I probably have to take my kiddo to pre-K, in which case I better be at work, and the bulletins need edited, and then I better go to the grocery store, and if the dog doesn't get her pills, I don't know, I'm just talking about myself, but maybe it's true for your own life, the kind of scatter. But there's the internal scatter too. I'm in the meeting, or I was at Thanksgiving dinner, right? And the person across from me said something that really tripped my trigger. But soon the meeting's over, someone says, pass the potatoes, and you never have the chance to wonder or understand what it was about you that got really tripped up. And so the problem with scatter is that it keeps us on the surface of things. And so you have to ask yourself, what contributes to my scatter? But the second piece that Eckhart would say kind of keeps us from knowing ourselves is acquisitiveness. Like, I want that, right? Acquisitiveness. And he doesn't mean like you want, several things for Christmas, like a new sweater or whatever. He means a kind of like grasping after things that we're never satisfied. We're not satisfied with our life. We're not satisfied with the gifts or talents that we have. We're always trying to accumulate something else, or we're not satisfied with our relationships, and maybe romantic or maybe just friendship. We always want more. We're grasping for more of that. Or maybe we just need someone to notice us a little bit. So we're grasping after the good deeds, the trying so hard, and getting people to notice that. We're all acquisitive in some way about something. What are you grasping for? And Eckhart would say the last thing that keeps us from going any deeper in ourselves is impatience. And we do live in an impatient society. We honk at the person who's too slow in front of us. We put up Christmas lights at the Home Depot before it's like even Halloween. That was my personal experience again. The person isn't getting us our coffee soon enough. The internet connection's too slow. Maybe I'm just talking about me, but we're kind of impatient. But we're also impatient in our own lives. I wish I was better at that skill right now. I wish I was a wiser person today. Chardin once said, "We want to be today what time and energy and work will make us tomorrow." Impatience is a kind of not wanting to do the hard thing. It's an instantaneous want for something without any of the work to get it. And I wonder what makes you impatient in life. And Eckhart says you have to reckon with those three things: your own scatteredness, your own acquisitiveness, your own impatience, if you ever want to find the margin to receive what God is offering, to receive the knowledge of your own self. And he says once you spend some time doing that, then the task is to let it all go. Eckhart uses the real monastic term detachment. We're attached to so many things. But mostly we're attached to the things we grasp after in life, the things we want because we think that if we don't get them, we'll be so deeply unsatisfied. And Eckhart says you have to know yourself well enough to be able to relinquish those things freely. Sometimes we're too attached to our own ego. Sometimes we're not attached enough. And either way, Eckhart says, you have to let them go. Now, Eckhart's talking about a kind of spirituality that is gentle with the self, that is compassionate with the self. And I feel compelled to say that there are sometimes people try to force us to detach or force us to relinquish our very selves. Cases of abuse, right? Mental, physical, sexual abuse, that's a forced relinquishment of self. Culture tries to compress us, tries to make us conform, tries to tell us, no, that can't possibly be who you are. You have to, that's not your gender identity, that's not your sexuality, that's not your dream or your desire, and that's not helpful either. None of those things are the kind of detachment or relinquishment Eckhart's talking about. Those are denials of humanity. Eckhart's talking about our own sense of wanting to draw near to God and knowing that sometimes the things we grasp so hard for are what keep us from God. We have to let go of the lesser things in order to find the greater gift of being with God. Now, if this is all sounding fairly esoteric to you, which is my great worry, well, I guess I have other great worries. But if it's sounding esoteric to you, that's not what I mean. What I want, I guess it boils down to this. If you think about clenching your hands really tightly, there are ways that we walk through life with our hands so deeply clenched, trying to hold on to all the things that we think are ours, all the things that will make us happy, all the things that we think will make us whole. And I don't mean physical, tangible stuff. I mean all the stuff of our hearts. And Eckhart would say right there, the clenched fist, you have to learn to open it just a little bit. Are you able to try just loosening your grip just slightly, to trust that God is with you, to trust that you're enough, to trust that you're loved, to be able to open your hands enough to find and receive yourself, your truest self, and God. Let go, Eckhart would say. Let go of it all. That's the path to joy. It's the path to hope and the path to peace. I'm closing each one of these Sundays with a poem. Not very good at conclusions anyway. Removals. Look for it. The Baptist cried in the wilderness, prepare the way. You must know that the only sure way of removing every obstacle to God comes through poverty. You have to be naked